Good afternoon, YouTube. Welcome to HEK's Vinyl Life. I am your host, Anthony K, and today is April 7th, 2020, and this is part 2 of a video that I presented a couple of days ago on the channel. My first in a series of documentary style videos that I'm calling Connections. And what that means is a band that maybe started out as one band, then split up, went their ways, reformed as another band, etc. So it's the connections that happen between artists as they progress through from early 70s to 2020. So that's why I'm calling them the Connections. And I'm continuing with part 2. We've been talking about Thin Lizzy, Phil Lynott and Thin Lizzy, and all the things that they were and became, going right up to 2020. In my first video, I showed you quite a few of the first albums. I'm not going to go back and talk about what I talked about in the other videos, so hopefully you've watched that first video. If not, I suggest stopping this video now, going back and watching the first video, because this video might not make a lot of sense if you don't know what I talked about in the first video. So if you haven't seen the first video, go back and watch that first, then come back and watch this one. I got lots to show in this one, and I think this is going to be a very interesting video, because the first video I focused strictly on Thin Lizzy albums, whereas this one I'm going to finish the Thin Lizzy albums and go forward to after Thin Lizzy broke up and what Thin Lizzy became, coming right up to 2020. So let's get a move on here right away, not wasting any time. So I finished off my last video at 1980. So we're going to start here at 1980, but I am going to jump back and show one album that was from 1978. It's not part of Thin Lizzy, but it is an album that the lead singer Phil Lynott of Thin Lizzy and bass player was involved in, and I think this is an absolutely spectacular album. There's no other album like this anywhere if you look in rock music. This is original. A lot of stores put this as a soundtrack. They think it's a soundtrack to a movie or a soundtrack to something. It's not a soundtrack album. It was like almost like the Who's Tommy rock opera or Quadrophenia. It's a conceptual album. Absolutely spectacular. I think anybody needs this album in their library. It is a fantastic listen. It is a one of a kind. This artist never made any other albums than this album. And this album is called Jeff Wayne's War of the Worlds. An absolutely spectacular and original album, and it is based on H.G. Wells' War of the Worlds, and it is a telling of H.G. Wells. It goes into the book, The War of the Worlds, and it tells a story, and musically. So it's like a play. So it's not a soundtrack. It's a rock album with it was recorded on 24-track stereo, multiple instruments, incredible long songs, guitar riffs, a fantastic collection of guest vocalists and players on this album that put this album together. Jeff Wayne masterminded this album, put it all together, and it's basically telling a musical telling of H.G. Wells' War of the Worlds, from beginning of the story to the end. It's all, the entire book is put to music and words and music, and it's absolutely an incredible album. Highly recommend it to have in your collection. You must have this album. Came with a fantastic book of paintings and the lyrics, and it tells the true, as H.G. Wells wrote it, story of War to the World of the Worlds. So why am I showing this in a Phil Lynott and Thin Lizzy Connections video? Because Phil Lynott was involved in this album. It was one of his first solo works. Now this album, like I said, featured a lot of people. Richard Burton, film actor Richard Burton, narrated the story. He was the narrator that told the story all through the album, between songs and in spots during songs. But we had David Essex doing vocals, Justin Hayward from the Moody Blues doing vocals. He did the single from this album. Joe Partridge, Chris Thompson, and Phil Lynott, who appeared in a song called The Spirit of Man, and he played Nathaniel, a minister who thinks that the Martians are Satan's from hell, abominations from hell, and he goes out and faces the aliens, thinking that that the power of God can stop these creatures. So Phil Lynott plays the character of Parson Nathaniel and does a fantastic song on here called The Spirit of Man. So that's why I've mentioned that one. War of the Worlds, Jeff Wayne's War of the Worlds. You need to get that album. It's the most original album you'll ever have in your collection. It's a double LP, absolutely fantastic, an hour-and-a-half long, absolutely fantastic. So I left off in the last video with an album called Solo in Soho, Phil Lynott's first solo works. And even though it was a solo album, every member of Thin Lizzy played on this album. Brian Downey, Scott Gorman, Snowy White, Darren Wharton, everybody played on this album, even Gary Moore. They all contributed to this solo album, so even though it's a solo album, titled a solo album by Phil Lynott, I consider it almost like a Lizzy album because so many people. He had other musicians as well, but it's real hodgepodge. And what's interesting about this album is there were a couple singles off this album. Dear Miss Lonelyhearts, which I absolutely love, was on here. But there was some other songs like Yellow Pearl. King's Call was another single on here. But Yellow Pearl would be a song that would be done again when he put his group Grand Slam together. But yeah, Solo in Soho, 1980, Phil Lynott's first solo effort. And from there we go to 1981. 1981, we are talking a live EP they released. Now they had done Live and Dangerous in 1977. So they did this EP shortly after releasing Chinatown. And it was a 6-song EP called Thin Lizzy Killers Live. A 6-song live EP. Once again, just showing you how powerful Thin Lizzy show. Look at that shot. Look at that shot of Phil Lynott and the band. That shows how rockin' these guys' shows were. So this album was recorded during the Chinatown tour. So we have Bad Reputation on here. Dear Miss Lonelyhearts. Now that was that solo song I told you on Solo in Soho. This is Dear Miss Lonelyhearts, played by Thin Lizzy. Worth the price of this EP alone is Dear Miss Lonelyhearts. An absolutely incredible recording of Thin Lizzy rocking out that song. Opium Trail, which was from Bad Reputation. Chinatown from Chinatown, Got to Give It Up, which was from Black Rose. And Are You Ready? A song that was never studio recorded. It was only recorded live. Are You Ready was on Live and Dangerous and on here, and they never actually studio recorded that song, which is crazy. So Thin Lizzy Live Killers, 1981. Then came is this 82? Yeah, 81. Okay, so and then in 81, just after the Live Killers came out, they released their second last studio effort, Renegade. A very different sounding album, but I love this album. I think it's a great album. Some really intense songs on here. They started to get kind of a heavier sound. There were some like really heavy, almost metal sounding songs on here, and some of their old style. It was kind of a blend of styles. It was an interesting album. I love it. Some people don't rate it too high, but I think it's an incredible work. And it was a personnel change. Once again, they had a personnel change. We had Phil Lynott, Scott Gorman, Brian Downey, and Snowy White. Well, actually, Snowy White was still on here. My mistake. The lineup changes on the last album. So this was the same lineup that was on Chinatown of Lynott, Gorman, Downey, and White, with Darren Wharton on keyboards. Thin Lizzy, Renegade, great songs on here. Angel of Death, wow, fantastic. Renegade, Pressure Will Blow, Leave This Town, Hollywood, which was the single from this album. No One Told Him. Fats, Mexican Blood, a kind of a Latin Spanish sounding song. And It's Getting Dangerous, a great album closer. Thin Lizzy, Renegade from 1981. Then came 1983. and their final studio album, which is absolutely spectacular. I put this in the top 4 albums of all time. Like I said, my personal favorites are Jailbreak, Bad Reputation, Black Rose, and this album, Thunder and Lightning. Thin Lizzy went out on a high note. They broke up shortly after this album, but they made a spectacular, and just looking at this, what do you think when you see this album? You think like Judas Priest. You think Metallica. Look at that album cover with the lightning and the guitar and the fist, you know, the studded fist out of the ground. That's because this album was very much Thin Lizzy's metal album. Very, very metal-oriented album. Incredible album. Thunder and Lightning. What a song. This is the one, Sun Goes Down, an incredible kind of ballady thing with a fantastic guitar solo. The Holy War. Cold Sweat, which was one of 2 singles off this album, a real rocker. Someday She's Gonna Hit Back, Baby Please Don't Go. Bad Habits, the second single from this album, and Heart Attack. But this I would put down as a metal album for sure. Fantastic album. The last album they released, they recorded as a group, and they had a lineup change again on here. Snowy White was no longer in the album, and they brought in guitarist John Sykes. So we had Lynott, Downey, Scott Gorman, John Sykes, and of course Darren Wharton on keyboards. And John Sykes, of course, went off after these guys, after he toured with Lizzy and this album. John Sykes went on to play with Whitesnake. So those of you who know Whitesnake and their famous albums, that John Sykes was a player on Whitesnake. He did return to Thin Lizzy in the 90s to play with the newly reformed Thin Lizzy in 1994 for their live tours. But this was the only studio album he recorded with Thin Lizzy. 1983, their final effort. Few more things here. So also in 1983, they did their final tour. It was their goodbye tour. They had planned on retiring, on breaking up. All of the members of the band wanted to do solo projects. Lynott, his health was failing. He was heavily into drugs and booze at the time, so he wasn't all there. But the members just wanted to do other things, so they announced that the Thunder and Lightning tour would be their farewell tour. The first recording to come out of that tour was a little thing called a BBC. It was a BBC Radio 1 concert from the Thunder and Lightning tour. That came out. But their goodbye album, after they did a final concert. I would have loved to have been at that concert. They did a final concert, and that final concert, they brought back everybody that had played in the band on stage for the final song. So they brought back Eric Bell, they brought back Gary Moore, they brought back Snowy White, they had John Sykes, Scott Gorman, everybody, all the guitarists that had played with Thin Lizzy over the years joined them on stage to do the rocker, the encore on this album, and it just blows the roof off. But this is their final album. This is a UK pressing I've got here, and it's called Life Live, and it documents the final concert that Thin Lizzy performed, their goodbye, songs that spanned the entire library of Thin Lizzy. Thunder and Lightning, Waiting for an Alibi, Jailbreak, Baby Please Don't Go, Holy War, Renegade, Hollywood, Gotta Give It Up, Angel of Death, Are You Ready, Boys Are Back in Town, Cold Sweat, Don't Believe a Word, Killer on the Loose, Sun Goes Down, Emerald, Black Rose, Still in Love with You, and The Rocker. And it was their goodbye, and this too, one of my favorite albums of all time for live albums. Both the Thin Lizzy live efforts, Live and Dangerous and Life Live, fantastic. This is a UK press, UK first pressing. Absolutely spectacular. And that was goodbye to Thin Lizzy. I do have a couple more Thin Lizzy albums here. This one is one I picked up recently, and it's called Thin Lizzy Live 77. I think it's a soundboard recording from what I can tell, the way it sounds. It's a soundboard recording for sure. Features The Boys Are Back in Town, Emerald, Wild One, Massacre, Are You Ready, Sun Goes Down, Dancing in the Moonlight, Sha-La-La-La, Whiskey in the Jar, and Boys Are Back in Town, an alternate reversion. So it was like a single. That was a studio song they just tacked onto the end. It's an unofficial album. Good for you. If you've got everything else, you might as well throw this one in your collection. But it's clearly not live in '77 because some of the songs on here, namely Sun Goes Down, was from 1983's Thunder and Lightning. So definitely not Thin Lizzy live in '77, whoever did this album. It's not bad sounding, it's all right. And then this one here, which came out in 2017, and it's considered probably one of the most expensive records in my collection now, according to Discogs, is Thin Lizzy Collected. Music on vinyl, numbered release. I got number 682, and it's on silver vinyl. Thin Lizzy Collected. And it is basically a greatest hits package, a double album greatest hits package. Really fine remastering and just a great pressing. I love the music on vinyl pressings. And this is a real treat to have. Notice, please, the font and lettering, the classic Thin Lizzy logo here. Note that because you're going to be seeing something in a minute that you'll understand why I said note that. But that's the great collected. It's basically a best of, and it featured everything. Whiskey in a Jar, Sarah, The Rocker, Still in Love with You, Wild One, Rosalie, Suicide, Boys Are Back in Town, Jailbreak, Cowboy Song, Emerald, Johnny Fox Meets Jimmy the Weed, Don't Believe a Word, Bad Reputation, Dancing in the Moonlight, That Woman's Gonna Break Your Heart, Soldier of Fortune, Do Anything You Want To, Waiting for an Alibi, Chinatown, Hollywood, Sun Goes Down, Cold Sweat, and then 3 songs from Lynott solo albums, King's Call, Old Town, and Yellow Pearl. So this, for anybody that doesn't want to buy all that massive Thin Lizzy albums and wants the best of Thin Lizzy, if you can find this anywhere, get it. Thin Lizzy Collected. But it's very hard to find. It was released in very limited quantities. So yeah, Phil Lynott, as I said in the last video, passed away in January 4th, 1986, while he was working on Grand Slam, his next band, who he took Brian Downey. Brian Downey and Phil started Thin Lizzy, and Brian Downey stayed with Phil when they put Grand Slam together, and helped a little bit there. But Thin Lizzy wanted to, Phil Lynott wanted to keep going. Even though the band Thin Lizzy was no more, he wanted to do a new band, and he called that band Grand Slam. So I'll get to Grand Slam in a second, but just before I do that, I'll show these last few Thin Lizzy things. This was a collection that was put together, and the reason why I mention Grand Slam now is because in 1991 this collection came out. 5 years after his death, after Phil Lynott's death, they released this CD, which was a best of CD, very similar, a smaller version of Collected, if you want to say anything. And it was all their hits, all the best songs from their albums. But the very last song on this album, it says 1990 on here, very last song, is a song called Dedication. And though it says Thin Lizzy, even though this is on a Thin Lizzy album, this was actually Grand Slam. Dedication was actually a Grand Slam song that they finished mixing and put on here under the handle of Thin Lizzy. But this actually wasn't a Thin Lizzy song. Dedication was actually a Grand Slam song. Of course, Grand Slam, Phil played the bass and did the vocals in Grand Slam, and he teamed up with a guitarist by the name of Lawrence Archer to form Grand Slam. But this Grand Slam song was snuck on here under the handle Thin Lizzy, Dedication, because Grand Slam had not recorded a full studio album. Phil died before Grand Slam could record the album. They had written songs and had actually started performing them in places, and there's a couple recordings of the Grand Slam. They did a couple of shows, and there's a couple of recordings of Grand Slam, but they never did put out their solo album before their first album before Phil died. Here is a collection of B-sides and rarities, all sorts of B-sides and rarities that I picked up. I don't even remember where I got this. Thin Lizzy B-sides and rarities. I think this is an unofficial collection. And last but not least, the last in the Thin Lizzy catalog, and this is from 2011. So Thin Lizzy broke up in 1984 officially. They were done in 1984. And in 1994, Phil died in 1986, and in 1994, 10 years after the band broke up, Brian Downey, Scott Gorman, Darren Wharton put the band back together and toured to do tribute shows marking the 10th anniversary of the demise of Thin Lizzy in 1994. And they toured around doing shows. They had another vocalist. I don't remember who the vocalist was at that time. But they toured 1994 to, I think, 96. And then they went away. But then they returned again around 2009. They brought the band back together yet again and brought on board a vocalist by the name of Ricky Warwick, who was a great replacement to Phil Lynott. But nobody could ever replace Phil Lynott, obviously. He was fantastic. But he gave the right sound for the band. He had the right vocal voice for the band. And so Wharton, Darren Wharton on keyboards, Brian Downey on drums, and Scott Gorman on guitar, brought in Ricky Warwick on board. And to mark the 25th anniversary of Phil Lynott's passing, because he passed away in '86. So on the 25th anniversary of Phil Lynott's passing, they went on tour once again. And out of that tour came this album here, Thin Lizzy, live in London on the 22nd of January 2011 in the Odeon Hammersmith Apollo, a double live album of Thin Lizzy performing all the classics that we know and love by Thin Lizzy, with Ricky Warwick on vocals. And that was 2012. 2011, the album was released in 2012. So jumping backwards for a second, back to 1985. This particular recording came out in 2003. It was actually finally released in 2003, but like I said, Grand Slam was the next thing that Phil was doing that he never got to finish. And so Grand Slam released this album in 2003, but was actually recorded back in 1984. And it is a recording of Grand Slam performing newly recorded songs. There's a couple Thin Lizzy songs on here. But this was basically the material they had been writing. They did a couple of shows before Phil passed away, and this one particular show was captured. It's called Grand Slam, Twilight's Last Gleaming, The Last of Grand Slam. And it was called Phil Lynott's Grand Slam, and if you can see the lettering, they used the same font and everything that Thin Lizzy used for their logo, for the Grand Slam logo. Same style of logo. And as I said, they brought a number of songs on here. Yellow Pearl was what I mentioned. Yellow Pearl was on that Thin Lizzy Solo and Soho album. But there were songs on here. 19 Sister. Remember these titles. 19 Sisters of Mercy, Harlem. Cold Sweat was on here. A verse that was one of the Thin Lizzy songs that they performed. Dedication. Remember Dedication? Dedication's on here. Parisian Walkaways, which was a Gary Moore and Phil Lynott song, which you'll be seeing in a second. And Military Man, also a Gary Moore and Phil Lynott song. So this was one of the few performances of Grand Slam. They never got their album recorded, and you'll see something in a minute. Now, I mentioned Military Man and, what did I say, Parisian Walkaways. Well, those are Gary Moore songs from this one right here. Gary Moore, Run for Cover. This album was from 1985, I believe. Released just before, yes, 1985. This album was released, probably some of the last things Phil Lynott recorded before he died. Actual studio music that Phil recorded. And he did two songs on here with Gary Moore, and they were Military Man and Out in the Fields on this album. Military Man and Out in the Fields. Parisian Walkaways was on Solo and Soho, sorry. But yeah, he recorded those with Gary Moore on that album, and it was also released as a 12-inch single. Out in the Fields and Military Man But the thing that's really great about this 12-inch single is it's got a version of Gary Moore doing Still in Love with You, the song that he recorded way back on the Nightlife album of Thin Lizzy. This is Gary Moore doing Still in Love with You with Phil Lynott, a new recording of that song from 1985. And those are the last things of Phil that were studio-wise. He did record one single with Grand Slam, A Whiter Shade of Pale. Yes, that classic song is on a single. I don't have it. I wish I could. If I could find a copy of that single, I would love to have it. It was the only thing that was studio song that was finished and released by Grand Slam a few years after Grand Slam gave up the ghost. But yeah, that's out there somewhere. And that and Dedication were the only things Grand Slam recorded at the time. So yes, I said in 2012, Thin Lizzy were no more. I mean, well, Thin Lizzy are back in 2012. Not no more. Thin Lizzy were back in 2012 with Ricky Warwick on vocals, Brian Downey, Scott Gorman, and Darren Wharton. And they played right through, and they still play the odd show right up to today. They don't record any material under Thin Lizzy. Haven't recorded any live albums or anything under Thin Lizzy. But they still record material. I mean, they still perform live shows right up to today. But in 2000 and I think it's 15, if I'm not right, 2013, because they were doing so well, that 2011-12 tour with Ricky Warwick, that 25th anniversary of Lynott's death tour, because it was so popular, they decided that they wanted Scott Gorman and Ricky Warwick decided they wanted to continue the Thin Lizzy into studio albums again. But they didn't feel it was right to release albums under the Thin Lizzy name, New Music, because Phil wasn't in the band. Phil was long gone, and Thin Lizzy was Phil. He was a huge part of Thin Lizzy. So Ricky Warwick and Scott Gorman just got together with Damon Johnson, another great player who had played with Alice Cooper on his Dirty Deeds album, and a couple other musicians, and they formed, they still continued as Thin Lizzy doing shows, but they decided that all new material, which sounded so, once you hear these guys, you'll go, yeah, it's Thin Lizzy. Thin Lizzy's back. You know, Phil's not there, but Thin Lizzy's back. This is like, you know, AC/DC after Bon Scott died. You know, this is that sort of sound. You know, we've seen it with other bands where the vocalist has been replaced. So these guys are called the Blackstar Writers. So this is their first album from 2013, Blackstar Writers. All hell breaks loose. An absolutely incredible return. As soon as you put it on, you can hear the salute to Thin Lizzy on there. This is a double LP. You must have, if you are a fan of Thin Lizzy, you need these albums in your collection. Blackstar Writers debut album, All Hell Breaks Loose, incredible. Bound for Glory, incredible. Kingdom of the Lost, fantastic. Hey Judas, Before the War, Right to Be Wrong. This is just an absolutely fantastic album. I highly, highly recommend this album. Ricky Warwick, Scott Gorman. This is Thin Lizzy today. The sound is there. The trademark sounds, little sounds that you heard in all the Thin Lizzy music is in here. But they are the Blackstar Writers. They are Thin Lizzy of the 2000s, 2010s. Thin Lizzy of the 2010s. And that's their debut album. Then came, in 2015, we have their second album. And this one's entitled, is this a, yeah, this is a gatefold. I'll show you the gatefold. This one's entitled The Killer Instinct. Second album from Blackstar Writers, aka Thin Lizzy. The Killer Instinct. With great songs on here. Soldier's Town, Killer Instinct, You Little Liar, Turn in Your Arms, Through the Motions, Blindsided, Fantastic album, highly recommend. It is the continuation of Thin Lizzy, like I said, in my opinion. And you'll see it. You start listening to these Blackstar Writers albums, you're going to go, hey, it's Thin Lizzy. Next up came Heavy Fire, their third effort from 2017. Heavy Fire with When the Night Comes, Dancing with the Wrong Girl, Who Rides a Tiger, Testify or Say Goodbye, Ticket to Rise, Thinking About You Could Get Me Killed. Heavy Fire, Blackstar Writers 2017, aka Thin Lizzy. And then from just this past year, from September 2019, and I got this one of 500 limited edition. I got the special edition of this album, and this is called Another State of Grace, their latest album from September of 2019. An incredible album with Another State of Grace. What else is on here? Soldier of the Ghetto, In the Ghetto, Why Do You Love Me, Standing in the Line, In the Shadow of the War Machine. An incredible album, Blackstar Writers, and this was on a really, really nice gold black splatter, limited to 500 copies. Blackstar Writers, aka Thin Lizzy, Scott Gorman, Ricky Warwick, and Scott Gorman, basically the only surviving Thin Lizzy members on here. Original Thin Lizzy, well, Warwick joined in 2009, but still. This is Thin Lizzy today. Blackstar Writers, Another State of Grace 2019. And last up on our show here, released in 2019, after how many years? 1985, we're talking. 1985 to 95, 2005, 35 years later, after Phil Lynott created Grand Slam, Lawrence Archer, the guitarist that he joined with to create Grand Slam, finally releases that album that should have been released 35 years ago. He finally, and it's called Grand Slam Hit the Ground. And this is an absolute must-have. Classic Rock Magazine voted it one of the best rock albums of 2019. One of the best rock albums of 2019, voted by Classic Rock Magazine. And this is an absolute must-have for everybody that ever liked Thin Lizzy, because Phil Lynott's Grand Slam finally has come to fruition. Lawrence Archer finally got together with some musicians and finally put this thing together. And half the songs of this album are the Phil Lynott songs that Phil Lynott wrote. 19, remember I mentioned 19 that they performed way back on this CD in 1985? 19 finally gets recorded. Military Man, the song that was on the Gary Moore album. Dedication, the song that was on that Thin Lizzy Greatest Hits album. Sisters of Mercy, which is performed on here. Five of the 9 songs on here were written by Lynott. 19, Military Man, Sisters of Mercy, Crime Rate. So finally, after a long time, Phil Lynott's final songs got recorded, and this album is absolutely incredible. Hit the Ground, Grand Slam. Notice the fonting, the same as the Thin Lizzy fonting. So finally, Grand Slam came to fruition in the fall of 2019. This finally came out, and you must have it. And that's the story of Thin Lizzy, a visual story of Thin Lizzy, Phil Lynott, Grand Slam, and Blackstar Writers, who to this day perform. When you go see Blackstar Writers, you will see them performing not only album music from their 4 currently released albums, but you'll be hearing Thin Lizzy classics in those shows as well. So Blackstar Writers perform both as Thin Lizzy and as Blackstar Writers. And that's everything. Finishing off with some visual material in case you want to know more and you want to see what these guys are all about. This is Live and Dangerous, the DVD version if you don't have the CD version. And what's great about this particular package is there is a live CD in here, and this is the only place where you can get this live at the Derby in 1975. This music CD right here is not available anywhere else. So this is a real treat, worth the price of this DVD alone, is this live concert, mini concert, or whatever you want to call it, by Thin Lizzy, included free with the Live and Dangerous video. This is Thin Lizzy's Greatest Hits, which is a collection basically of all their music videos. Thin Lizzy's Greatest Hits on DVD. This is Are You Ready? This, I don't even know. This is Rock Blast. This was recorded in Rock Blast, I believe, in I'm thinking 1981. Thin Lizzy live at Rock Blast. Great video. And this is live in concert 1980. This is from the Thunder and Lightning tour. Really rare to have. Not the greatest quality video, but actually not bad. Not bad. Finally get to see that Thunder and Lightning tour of 1983. Thin Lizzy, live in concert 1983. And that's it. That's everything. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Comments down below. Turn on that notification bell so you don't miss any more videos. Hope you enjoyed all of this. It was a big documentary for me to do, but it's something I wanted to do. I'll be doing another one of these probably in a few months on another band. Don't forget to follow my Instagram, AGK_Lifetime of Vinyl, where I post a spin of the day every day. We'll see you all on the next video. Bye for now.